Martin down a little bit there, and we'll get him back up. He's on a videotape there. Thank you for all the folks who've been preparing food and preparing the room and for the whole event. I'm Jeff Black, and I'm on the committee that did this. I'm the pastor here, so I've been asked to welcome you. Welcome!
Welcome!
Yay!
Yay!
The day structure will be, we're going to have some breakfast, and most of you have signed in. If you haven't signed in, please do before you leave to go on the morning activity, which is various service options, and they're out there, and you're signing in for them, I'm assuming. And so one of the things we need you to do before 9:30 is, if you haven't done that, to go along those and pick out one of those to be involved in. And there'll be more people coming, I'm sure, and you can tell them too to do it. We will, between 9:30 and 11, it's service projects, and there are several of them up there, and some of them you can stay here and do, and some of them you go out in the community and do. But that's very much in the spirit of the day, and so on. And then, do we want to say anything about, we just want to make sure people are back here.
Lunch is at 11:30, right?
Lunch is at 11:30, and we have tried to organize this so we can have lunch and watch the inaugural address. And it has been obscurity itself, finding out when who's going to give that address. But we think that we're back here and have our...
Looks like 11:55 as of this morning.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to have some nice lunch, and then we'll go upstairs and watch the address. After the address, we have a workshop on forgiveness, which is very much in the theme of Martin Luther King's work. And then we'll have a celebration. After that, with a presentation in the middle of it, which I'll be giving. So I'm very excited. We'll have a very full and busy and purposeful and great day. But that's everything to do together and to get to know each other, share meals, and so on. So welcome, and your agenda in the next few minutes is to get a muffin. Coffee is
right here.
Over here, and more is coming, so there'll be enough coffee for everybody. And there's juice, so help yourself and get yourself listed on, and we do have name tags, which I think maybe, since we didn't have them out in time, maybe we just put them around the tables. Maybe it's just nice if you put your first name on the name tag, because you'll be in conversations all day with people you might not know. It's just nice to have their name here.
Explain how they get to the service opportunities.
I want you to do that.
The way you get to the service opportunities is in your cars, and if you don't know where something is, ask myself or Phil Benowitz, and if someone doesn't have a ride, look around for, if you're not sure how to get there, or you need a ride with someone else, ask me or Bill. Right. If you, one of these service opportunities for those who want to stay here is writing letters to soldiers in Afghanistan. So there's a whole, we talked to Carla Rabinowitz, who has organized that and has names of people to write to and a whole protocol for doing that. And then Doris Bittenbender has Afghan, is that story, that's correct?
Yeah.
You have Afghans for Afghans.
Yeah.
And that's a weaving or knitting effort, and you want to speak to Doris about that. But, and on behalf of Hands Across the Club, and which is the other organization sponsoring this, the MLK committee, I also welcome you.
That's not cool. So, okay, are we ready for breakfast? Okay.
Yeah.
Christelle?
Okay, the juice is cranberry, orange, apple on the end, and we're bringing out some tomatoes.
All right, let's get the last one down. Yeah, we had a dual dumbbells.
I live on Sportsman's Pond.
Then we get it, okay? There you go. Great.
Yeah, if you're in a plane and you look down, you see Tully Pond, you see Akron, and Little Silver Lake.
Really closely,
John was a
Got
pilot
it.
in the 30s.
That's what I'm working
Oh.
What an arm.
Yeah, watch the wall and back. Look at the walls. The walls are the chip. Yeah, and then our school lasts for 93. Yeah.
You want to go help set him up? Amazing. Okay.
Yeah.
You're going to come up with me and Leah.
Have you been going swimming, Joe?
I did. I went this morning, Jeremiah.
Yeah, I've been going swimming. That's the same with next year, as I was in the pool.
Yeah, when do you go?
I go on Tuesdays.
Nice, Leah.
Yeah, thank goodness we have a local wide.
I go from 2:30.
He's 600 pounds.
I go from 2:30 to 3:30.
Yeah,
I go
good.
swimming from 2:30 to 3:30.
Try one more time, Michael. You can get all of them down.
Watch where you get another shot at it. Yep. Yep.
Okay.
Maybe, how about step back a little bit? That's good. And you get one more shot, right? Third of three? Yep. Yep, so you get one more to try to get the best one. Close. Close.
I also started running here in Orange. I ride on Tuesday. I'm not right. I'm not right. We're going to go shopping. We're going to go shopping.
Nice, Amanda. Great. Almost. You can get those last two. Oh, it's hard because I'm right against the wall.
Attention all staff, just a reminder, we will be
All right.
Probably when I get ready to leave, before I leave, I'll probably tap away at the front and find out if she needs help. I also have my social group,
Yeah.
Great back. Do you want me to go down to that now? Well, I just gotta sign this. No, it's 11, starts in 5 minutes. Yeah. Just
11, yeah, so I can write her a letter.
Okay, no, I'll have my call.
I know I gotta
Oh, so close.
go to Akron and then they
We're all neighbors. It's a nice area.
make sure the letters go where the letter has to go. If it's coming.
Survive half slave and half free. We made ourselves anew and vowed to move forward together. Together we determined that a modern economy requires railroads and highways to speed travel and commerce, schools and colleges to train our workers. Together we discovered that a free market only thrives when there are rules to ensure competition and fair play. Together, we resolved that a great nation must care for the vulnerable and protect its people from life's worst hazards and misfortune. Through it all, we have never relinquished our skepticism of central authority, nor have we succumbed to the fiction that all society's ills can be cured through government alone. Our celebration of initiative and enterprise, our insistence on hard work and personal responsibility, these are constants in our character. We have always understood that when times change, so must we. That fidelity to our founding principles requires new responses to new challenges. That preserving our individual freedoms ultimately requires collective action. For the American people can no more meet the demands of today's world by acting alone than American soldiers could have met the forces of fascism or communism with muskets and militias. No single person can train all the math and science teachers we'll need to equip our children for the future, or build the roads and networks and research labs that will bring new jobs and businesses to our shores. Now, more than ever, we must do these things together, as one nation and one people. This generation of Americans has been tested by crises that steel our resolve and prove our resilience. The decade of war is now ending. An economic recovery has begun. America's possibilities are limitless, for we possess all the qualities that this world without boundaries demands. Youth and drive, diversity and openness, an endless capacity for risk, and a gift for reinvention. My fellow Americans, we are made for this moment, and we will seize it so long as we seize it together. For we, the people, understand that our country cannot succeed when a shrinking few do very well and a growing many barely make it. We believe that America's prosperity must rest upon the broad shoulders of a rising middle class. We know that America thrives when every person can find independence and pride in their work. When the wages of honest labor liberate families from the brink of hardship. We are true to our creed when a little girl born into the bleakest poverty knows that she has the same chance to succeed as anybody else because she is an American. She is free, and she is equal not just in the eyes of God, but also in her own. We understand that outdoor programs are inadequate for the needs of our time. So we must harness new ideas and technology to remake our government, revamp our tax code, reform our schools, and empower our citizens with the skills they need to work harder, learn more, reach higher. But while the means will change, our purpose endures. A nation that rewards the effort and determination of every single American. That is what this moment requires. That is what will give real meaning to our freedom. We, the people, still believe that every citizen deserves a basic measure of security and dignity. We must make the hard choices to reduce the cost of health care and the size of our debts. But we reject the belief that America must choose between caring for the generation that built this country and investing in the generation that will build its future. When we remember the lessons of our past, when twilight years were spent in poverty, and parents of a child with a disability had nowhere to turn, we do not believe that in this country freedom is reserved for the lucky, homes swept away in a terrible storm. The commitments we make to each other, through Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, these things do not sap our initiative, they strengthen us. They do not make us a nation of takers, they free us to take the risks that make this country great. We, the people, still believe that our obligations as Americans are not just to ourselves, but to all posterity. We will respond to the threat of climate change, knowing that the failure to do so would betray our children and future generations. Some may still deny the overwhelming judgment of science, but none can avoid the devastating impact of raging fires and crippling drought and more powerful storms. The path towards sustainable energy sources will be long and sometimes difficult. But America cannot resist this transition. We must lead it. We cannot cede to other nations the technology that will power new jobs and new industries. We must claim its promise. That's how we will maintain our economic vitality and our national treasure. Our forests and waterways, our croplands and snow-capped peaks. That is how we will preserve our planet, commanded to our care by God. That's what will lend meaning to the creed our fathers once declared. We, the people, still believe that enduring security and lasting peace do not require perpetual war. Our brave men and women in uniform, tempered by the flames of battle, are unmatched in skill and courage. Our citizens, seared by the memory of those we lost, know too well the price that is paid for liberty. The knowledge of their sacrifice will keep us forever vigilant against those who would do us harm. But we are also heirs to those who won the peace, and not just the war, who turned sworn enemies into the surest of friends, and we must carry those lessons into this time as well. We will defend our people and uphold our values through strength of arms and the rule of law. We will show the courage to try and resolve our differences with other nations peacefully, not because we are naive about the dangers we face, but because engagement can more durably lift suspicion and fear. America will remain the anchor of strong alliances in every corner of the globe. And we will renew those institutions that extend our capacity to manage crisis abroad. For no one has a greater stake in a peaceful world than its most powerful nation. We will support democracy from Asia to Africa, from the Americas to the Middle East, because our interests and our conscience compel us to act on behalf of those who long for freedom. And we must be a source of hope to the poor, the sick, the marginalized, the victims of prejudice, not out of mere charity, but because peace in our time requires the constant advance of those principles that our common creed describes: tolerance and opportunity, human dignity, and justice. We, the people, declare today that the most evident of truths, that all of us are created equal, is the star that guides us still, just as it guided our forebears through Seneca Falls. Know that they are cared for and cherished, and always safe from harm. That is our generation's task, to make these words, these rights, these values of life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness real for every American. Being true precise path to happiness. Progress does not compel us to settle centuries-long debates about the role of government for all time, but it does require us to act in our time. For now, decisions are upon us, and we cannot afford delay. We cannot mistake absolutism for principle, or substitute spectacle for politics, or treat name-calling as reasoned debate. We must act. We must act knowing that our work will be imperfect. We must act knowing that today's victories will be only partial, and that it will be up to those who stand here in 4 years, and 40 years, and 400 years hence to advance the timeless spirit once conferred to us in a spare Philadelphia hall. My fellow Americans, the oath I have sworn before you today, like the one recited by others who served in this cabinet, was an oath to God and country, not party or faction. And we must faithfully execute that pledge during the duration of our service. But the words I spoke today are not so different from the oath that is taken each time a soldier signs up for duty, or an immigrant realizes her dream. My oath is not so different from the pledge we all make to the flag that waves above and that fills our hearts with pride. They are the words of citizens, and they represent our greatest hope. You and I, as citizens, have the power to set this country's course. You and I, as citizens, have the obligation to shape the debates of our time, not only with the votes we cast, but with the voices we lift in defense of our most ancient values and enduring ideas. Let us, each of us, now embrace with solemn duty and awesome joy what is our lasting birthright. With common effort and common purpose, with passion and dedication, let us answer the call of history and carry into an uncertain future that precious light of freedom. Thank you, God bless you, and may He forever bless these United States of America. Please join me in welcoming the award-winning artist, Kevin Clark, accompanied by the United States Marine Band.
I appreciate everyone coming, and I'm Mark Scholl, I direct Hands Across North Quadrant, and we co-sponsored this event because of the MLK Committee. And I want to thank, before I say anything more, Bonnie Schumann has done things for 11 years, was at the inauguration. But the reason we did this is because we feel that Hand's mission is very strongly aligned both to what Martin Luther King thought was at the core of a healthy life, and also what President Obama said. And so basically, Hands is about thinking through deeply as a community, how do we act with a common purpose to address the challenges of the future. We look at the future and we see many challenges. There are many challenges that we face now as a community. We see even more serious ones. And I just had my granddaughter was just born 2 days ago, and I was like, this is a great, that was a big mistake, but she's a lovely, beautiful Margaret June, 10 pounds. My wife was born with me here with my daughter and son-in-law in the hospital. I was there this weekend. But when I think of what kind of world, and they want to move here from Somerville, what kind of world do I want for my daughter, and how does that relate to what Obama, Martin Luther King said, and Hands is concerned with? And I want a world for my daughter, again, where people can act with common purpose, and this community remains the kind of wonderful, supportive, satisfying place it is. And I think when I think what would make that world work for her, a world where there are networks, where everyone has, for every need there is a network, where people can get support from their neighbors. This community does a tremendous job already building networks, but there are many people who are not in networks of support, particularly the poorest people in this community. And it also, I would want her and your children and grandchildren live in a world where for every public policy issue, there's some kind of process where people can come to agreement as a community on how to move, because we know what happens, and we've seen this, and we see this at national and local levels, when people are not in agreement, they spend their time struggling as opposed to solving problems. So Hands is about asking the question, what would a culture look like? What would a culture look like that supports this kind of collaboration across difference? And we really look at all differences, political perspective, age, class, ethnic, race, sexual orientation, every kind of gender, every kind of difference. And we ask the question, what would the culture have to look like for that to happen? What can we do as a community? And this community for many years, for the last 15 years, many groups have been all working not just on the And so, one of the things that Hands is now thinking about Martin Luther King, key because of the news today. And so we want to ask you to, we're going to, this is a stage and a project where we're going to be creating, we got funded, the MLK Committee and Hands funded from the Mass Service Alliance to do a piece of public sculpture on forgiveness. To build something, put it in a prominent place that people can drive by and think about and come to, and think deeply about this very hard thing to do. So what we've done is as part of this sculpture, we've asked people to write, we're looking to generate 250 word stories. And then we want those stories to be incorporated in this piece of art. And we're looking to artists. We're going to issue a request for proposals, and I hope you'll tell your artist friends about this in a couple of weeks. The artists will be invited to submit proposals for a piece of art that will be built in a couple of days. We call it art raising, like a barn raising. And there's $700 or $800 for materials, no money for the artist, but we'd like them to submit proposals. And so this workshop that we're going to talk about now is about talking a little bit about forgiveness. People have written stories about their personal experiences, and then we're going to break up in groups. We're going to read a story, ask people to comment, and then there are a couple of artists that we've asked to speak to what they've heard, and we'll write that down and incorporate that in the request for proposals. We're starting early, so we're missing, I think what we're going to have artists commenting, and how we're going to do that. Ken is here, and Gordon is here. Gordon is here. We had asked the artists to come at 1:15, and this got done early. So I think what we should do is if we proceed, maybe a couple of, really two groups kind of is that working? Three groups. Okay.
Because if the groups are smaller, everybody has no chance. Karen?
Yeah, so some of you are going to get on with the task of facilitating. Why don't Tom, you, Steve?
And then, let me have people share what's going on, what's going on if they were listening to them, or what does that make you think of? How does it make you feel? So we don't need, well, if you think that was bad, listen to what I like. You know, we just need to receive the stories and value them, and then respond with how will you respond in terms of what made you imagine, what made you think, just respond to what's going on in your life. Did you notice these little questions?
You mentioned about the artists.
Yeah, and so then, what within our speech group, and we're interested in where did that start then? Where did that story start? Where did the story and the conversation happen? What's going on in their creative mind? That's how I look at that. We need to have somebody in the group be willing to share with all of us some things that stood out. And we'll have
the alley and the board.
Great, so, it's really fun. And, you know, everything powerful happens through listening. So, that'll be fun, especially, that's what we're going to do, we'll listen to stories and share what's going on with us. So, let's just count off by threes. 1, 2,
1,
2,
3. Okay. 2. How do you regard the 2?
You got something set up. So what am I, a 2 or a 3?
Yeah, I got 2. Okay. One's over here. Two's over here. Chris will be in the middle of that. Okay?
Thank you.
Okay, well, it is now, let's check my actual here. It's 12:32, so let's be back here at 10 to 1.
Okay, well, this is a random selection, not random, but a briefly selected selection. I want it to be clear that we all do that. So, we all. Another thing that I thought was a very key point is we tend to think of forgiveness, in terms of I forgive, or I'm forgiven, or I'm forgiven, but that that's very personal level, and that there's also collective forgiveness. One nation to another nation, or even to a people that are touched with brutalized, one Rome people, so individual and collective. That nationally we certainly need to use a little bit of forgiveness amongst some of our national leaders, and that without that level, some kind of forgiveness, then nothing will get done. Restriction in some sense will collapse. And that it's the large-scale forgiveness, collectively and individually as part, which is necessary for us to stay sane, and that's what leads to true change in the world. It's a necessary part of it, and that kind of forgiving is healing, and it's really in a sense, a portrait of true hope. And that acknowledging that we as individuals, and that also we as communities of individuals, communities and as nations even, that we need each other, that we're social animals, and that love opens the doorway to forgiveness, and that love can't be legislated, it can't be mandated. It has to be invited and it has to be given, and the same is true with forgiveness. And we talked about some of the things that we love that divert us from loving each other. Things like the love of money or love of self. So then the comments from our two artists, some of the images and thoughts they had. Did I say their name? Yeah. Lydia said a place to go to experience the stories was her image. But no real image of the place yet, but maybe it changes. That forgiveness and the nature of forgiveness, the part of it we're involved with changes. That it needs to be something that's long-term and permanent, but also that changes. And then a place where all are welcome is some kind of way for group engagement. Those are just some of the thoughts that didn't coalesce into it should look like this. Some of the thoughts. maybe a seat, place to sit, in order to kind of feel love and acceptance. Is that good? And then the idea is raise also logo, all the different colors, either 7 or 10 colors. Either way they go.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Very much. The next,
So, I think it's great if we can stand. You can stand. I know we do that. God of our forebears and our God, who has summoned women and men throughout the ages to be your witnesses and sometimes your martyrs, come before you this day, remembering and being thankful for the life and the legacy of your servant, witness, and martyr, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We thank you for his time among us, for his words, his deeds, for the quality of his living witness, which pleases you daily with honor the brevity of his years. We rejoice in his example of obedient faith and the scenes and stations of his life, which inform and enrich our own faith journeys. And we beseech you this day for the strength and steadfastness and courage not only to remember, but also to obey. We remember his footsteps walking everywhere in Montgomery, Alabama during the post-bustle, sidestepping snarling dogs and swinging door clubs and potential fire hoses in Birmingham, charting a King's Highway in the desert wasteland of bigotry and hatred, from Selma, Montgomery, from Memphis to Jackson, from Chicago to Cicero, walking ever and always where Jesus walked, among the lone and the lost, the downtrodden and the outcast, those denied their dignity, robbed of their rights. Lord God, and enable us to follow his footsteps, that we too may be found in those places of danger, division, and discord, and sorrow, where love is so desperately needed, but so painfully absent. Help us hear and feel anew the This talk is going to try to explicate, I guess, the main sources that influenced his conscience and gave him the power over the conscience of the country. My father was Persephone. In 1958, on our farm, we were watching our black and white TV, and a young black man was on. He was speaking to a black congregation. We lived in upstate New York, the country. We had someone that we termed a colored lady who came twice a month and cleaned. There was one black student in our one-room country schoolhouse named Teresa Brewer. We had to drive by her house on the way to school, and it was the poorest house in our rural area. But we lived, we thought, so far from the prejudice itself. In those days, blacks were very rarely on television. And when they were, it was always presented as a wonder if they were articulate or talented. So, like Nat King Cole, Ralph Bunche, or Marian Anderson would come on with their immense dignity, and my parents would point to them and say to us, kids, there were 6 of us, see, it's wrong to be prejudiced. In this family, we don't want anyone to be prejudiced. That was good. It was good teaching. We're good parents. I'm grateful for it. But I was tons of prejudice at an unconscious level beneath the surface of my family. But those words they taught were home. My father had been an elected official. He was a city attorney in our town, and he went down to defeat partly, actually, on racial issues. He used to say after that, you know, we're as prejudiced up here as anywhere down south, son. We're just more professional. He thought of himself as and he described himself as a dead politician, and he just said nothing better than good about prison. And he despaired of seeing improvement on race in his life. And he did die in 1961, so he was much precisely. One night, in the late 50s, something changed in our house. The news report was on the Montgomery boycott. And so somebody came on and he grabbed my twin and I over there and he said, shh, sit down, listen, Betty, get the kids, get the rest of the kids and come in here. Because it was a new voice. It was a new voice in America, and my father heard it. And he said, that's the best speaker I've ever heard. I just hope he lives. I fell in love with that voice. Every time Martin Luther King was on radio or TV, for me, it was like listening to a great song. His voice was rich. It was totally distinctive. It was a biblical voice. I always learned when he spoke. He would take me somewhere new with his moral logic. I remember following him and listening to him and thinking, I just wish everybody would talk like that. Like it would have been easy. He was the conscience of our land for our time, and so tonight I'm going to trace the three major influences on the formation of this spectral influence conscience. There are essentially 3 major streams of spirituality that flow together into his person and enable him to seize the moment of change. I'll be looking at those 3 influences from the following 5 works. The letter from the Birmingham jail, April 1963, the I Have a Dream speech of August of that year, the Nobel Prize acceptance speech of December 1964, his great sermon challenging war in Vietnam called Breaking the Silence, delivered 1 year to the day before he was killed. April 4th, 1967. And his final speech, I see the promised land when you move to the truly treasured glory. When I read them, those talks, I hear again that wonderful voice. And they preach. Reviewing this material for my preparation, I was struck by how sensitive King always was to families like mine. he intuitively understood what we needed to do. Because what we needed, the people he wanted to change, what we needed was to hear an undeniable intellectual brilliance, speaking with the accents of an African American. That helped the prejudice we didn't know we had inside us. In those 5 brief pieces, as he focuses on the dilemma of justice, essentially, or usually, for Black Americans, King moves with ease from Socrates to Amos, from Lincoln to Luther, from Aquinas to Augustine, from Gandhi to Paul. We could not really have heard and followed him without that range of reference and his compelling way of language. But what is astounding is that he never talked one way to families like mine and one way to other people. Speaking on his last night, he was talking to the garbage collectors of Memphis. And he moved them with an address that cites Euripides and Lincoln, and then moves suddenly through the Gospel of Luke, and then ranges over international political landscape. His was a voice that held many, many people together. We really haven't heard one like it since. The first influence on his conscience that I want to deal with is the prophetic movement in Judaism. This is the influence that forms the motivation for his conscience. His most frequently cited reference is the passage from Amos 5, let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like a ever-flowing stream. But that it isn't simply the number of quotes from Isaiah and Jeremiah and Amos. It's that the spirit of the prophets comes upon you. And there are times when he becomes one of them. I want to cite 2 paragraphs from the great letter from the Birmingham jail and then some passages from the sermon in Brookside Church. At the end of this letter in the Birmingham jail, and this is citation, I want you to listen especially to the questions, to the terrible, prophetic questions. So, he gives that.
Birmingham with the hope that the white religious leadership of this community would see the justice of our cause and with deep moral concern serve as the channel through which our just grievances would get to the power structure. I had hoped that each of you would understand, but again, I have been disappointed. I have heard numerous religious leaders of the South call upon their worshipers to comply with the desegregation decision because it is the law. But I have longed to hear the white ministers say, follow this decree because integration is morally right and the Negro is your brother. I have traveled the length and breadth of Alabama, Mississippi, and all the other southern states. On sweltering summer days and crisp autumn mornings, I have looked at her beautiful churches with their lofty spires pointing heavenward. I have beheld the impressive outlay of her massive religious education buildings. Over and over again, I have found myself asking, what kind of people worship here? Who is their God? Where were their voices of support when tired, bruised, and weary Negro men and women decided to rise from the dark dungeon of complacency to the bright hills of creative protest? In deep disappointment, I have wept over the laxity of the church, but be assured that my tears have been tears of love.
Those of you who know Isaiah and Jeremiah will recognize here what kind of the prophets provide the motivation of his conscience. That motivation is a combination of rage, grief, and love. It's all 3. The prophet's heart is torn. Isaiah, the prophet's heart is torn by 2 forces. When he sees people forsaking their God and wandering into false worship, he is driven nearly mad. By the end of his life, King's own psychic suffering was so acute that he suffered hideous nightmares and vowed turn, as we're exploring this prophetic stream from to a speech that I heard in April of '67, which he called Breaking the Silence, a sermon at Riverside Church, came out against the war in Vietnam. We will hear the influence of prophets with even greater clarity. When King came to Riverside Church that night, he had done considerable research, probably more than for any other single address. He marshaled both a moral and historical argument I still think is the most comprehensive critique of the war ever made. This, too, is one of the prophet's functions, to recall the truths of history, especially the truths of God's action in history, and especially God's compassion for the poor that you can see. Over and over in the King's sermon, he cites his beloved Isaiah. Listen.
All over the globe, men are revolting against old systems of exploitation and oppression, and out of the wombs of a frail world, new systems of justice and equality are being born. The shirtless and barefoot people of the land are rising up as never before. The people who sat in darkness have seen a great light.
Or again,
with the powerful commitment, we shall boldly challenge the status quo and thereby speed the day when every valley shall be exalted and every mountain and hill shall be made low, and the crooked shall be made straight, and the rough places plain.
This prophetic imagination caused King to see the poor of other lands with a terrible urgency. Speaking of the peasants whose corpses we saw nightly on our TV news, he said,
they watch as we poison their water, as we kill 1 million acres of their crops. They must weep as the bulldozers roar through their areas preparing to destroy the precious trees. They wander into the hospitals with at least 20 casualties from American firepower for one Viet Cong-inflicted injury. They wander into the towns and see thousands of the children homeless, without clothes, running in packs on the streets like animals. They see the children degraded, soliciting for their mothers.
That compassionate and prophetic vision extended also to our own soldiers. With chilling accuracy, King predicted what would happen to so many of them.
I am as concerned about our troops there as anything else. For what we are submitting them to in Vietnam is not simply the brutalizing process that goes on in any war, where armies face each other and seek to destroy. We are adding cynicism to the process of death, for they must know after a short period there that none of the things we claim to be fighting for are really involved. The more sophisticated surely realize that we are on the side of the wealthy and the secure while we create a hell for the poor. Somehow this madness must cease.
It was shattering to sit in that room and hear him speak those words, to watch the tears on his face and to see his trembling hand. He called the prophetic dimension of his work the breaking of silence. It was, he said, a vocation of action. I do think he was different than the voices we hear today where people are kind of pointing out what's wrong with America, and especially what's wrong with the other side of America and so on, where what you sense is the rejoicing that I'm right and how clever I am about how they're wrong. That whole thing, you know what I'm talking about? The difference is there's no agony. There's just rejoicing that I'm right. But when you listen to King, what you heard was the agony of the suffering, because he could feel the suffering that's being imposed. We come to the second stream, the second spiritual influence that shaped his voice and through his conscience changed our land. If the prophetic calling motivated him, it was Gandhi's teaching, rooted in the Hindu concept of ahimsa, which actually just literally means to avoid violence, that provided his methodology, King's methodology. Because seeing injustice and just complaining is useless. He needed a way forward. In his acceptance speech for the Nobel Peace Prize in the highly secular arena of Oslo, King put it
Negroes of the United States, following the people of India, have demonstrated that nonviolence is not sterile passivity, but a powerful moral force which makes for social transformation.
The most celebrated of the older biographies of Gandhi, the monumental work of Fisher, contains several photographs of Atlanta Black Baptist pastors visiting the Mahatma Gandhi's ashram during the 1930s. It did not escape the attention of these spiritual leaders that someone across the world was representing a disenfranchised and desperate reform group and was leading them to independence against the mightiest empire in the world without firing a shot. When the black pastors got back home, you can imagine the conversations in those parsonages. And one of those parsonages was the one where a young boy named Martin was growing up. What they had seen was so amazing to them. Gandhi was known to keep the Prime Minister of England waiting on the phone while he finished his prayers. Gandhi was famously free, though he was living in this astoundingly oppressed province. When he entered Buckingham Palace, wearing only his loincloth, a reporter asked him if he felt appropriately dressed to meet the King of England. And he answered, "Oh yes, I am sure he will be wearing enough for both of us." Gandhi was happy to meet the great pastors of Atlanta. He told them, the Negro in America is the Harijan of the West. The Harijan was a phrase that Gandhi used to describe the lowest of the caste in India, that the normal name was the hideous name, untouchable, but Gandhi named it the Harijan, which is a word that means chosen. I think King went to Oslo in part to pay tribute to Gandhi. It was, of course, Gandhi, influenced by Western sources as various as Ruskin, Tolstoy, Thoreau, and especially Jesus, and by that Hindu doctrine of ahimsa, who formulated the technology of nonviolence, or as he preferred to call it, soul force. Ahimsa is a word that means the avoidance of violence, but Gandhi used it not as the avoidance of conflict. He developed the idea, especially by meditating on the passion of Jesus in Holy Week. He developed it as an entering of conflict while avoiding and refusing to use violence. Redemptive suffering would awaken the conscience of the oppressors. Once King learned it, he saw immediately how that could be applied in a Christian setting for political purposes. Here then was the means for his work, a way towards liberation that intended as well to liberate the oppressor. Gandhi's teachings were often summarized this way: the law to be challenged must be intrinsically unjust, like the law of salt. Gandhi King then used Augustinian theology to explain what unjust and just law is. Second, negotiations in good faith must be attempted before the confrontation. Third, deliberate violations of the unjust law must be announced in advance so that everything is done in the open. Fourth, during the violation of the law, the workers of nonviolence must suffer without resistance the wrath of the upholders of that law. And fifth, in the ensuing crisis of conscience provoked by an innocent suffering, the power of God will heal the community. All of that is needed now to deal with the collapse of law in our country to keep us safe from violence. If you examine the circumstances leading to King's arrest in Birmingham and study the letter itself, you will see how perfectly he had learned Gandhi's lessons. I have made this sound abstract. Gandhi's teaching, but of course it wasn't abstract at all. If you want to learn really wonderfully about King, the primary source is Taylor Branch's great trilogy of biography. Here's Taylor Branch's account of Robert Moses and his friends Curtis Dawson and Preacher Noel in The next morning, August 29th, the three of them found a sidewalk near the courthouse blocked by three criminal men. Dawson recognized one in front of the door, Jack Caston. They were ready to talk. Caston asked Moses where he was going. To the registrar's office, Moses replied. Caston said, no, he wasn't. And he struck a quick, swiping blow to Moses' forehead with the handle of his knife. In a mystical discovery even more vivid than the pain shooting through his head, Moses felt himself separating from his body as he staggered on the sidewalk. He floated 10 feet up in the air so that he could watch the attack on himself comfortably. His fears became as remote as Caston's grunts, and time slowed down so that he could hear Preacher running away. In peaceful surrender, he saw Caston hit him again behind the right temple. He saw himself sink to his knees. He saw Caston drive his face to the pavement with a crushing blow to the head. Through waves of concussion, he heard Curtis Dawson pleading with Caston to stop the beating. His first thoughts upon hearing the feet of his attackers apart were that he could function in spite of his wounds, and that it was urgently important to reach the courthouse. We've got to go on to the registrar, he said, as Dawson struggled to overcome his horror at the sight of the blood flowing down from the gashes in Moses' head. Preacher Knox returned to help him to his feet. We can't let something like this stop us, Moses said. That's the whole point. Dawson replied bravely that he was ready. Preacher Knox agreed. Moses was deeply moved by their decision, and most especially by the preacher's unexpected courage. The county registrar reserved the practice, well, what have we got here? Look for Negro customers, but it vanished in gas at the sight of Moses, whose bloody head and shirt combined with his serene, quiet voice to give him a presence as eerie as Vancouver's ghost. That's what was happening in the United States as part of the country. That's what was happening as well. It was the nobility of that suffering that gave our land her chance at rebirth. You can see, listening to that passage, you can understand why Robert Moses' grandchildren and all his spiritual grandchildren stood for hours this last fall to vote when they sensed that people were trying once again to prevent them from voting because they knew this. This is how King paid his power. This is what all his workshops were about. How not to return violence, but just let it happen and grab a hold of yourself, separate your body and go ahead and do what was wrong, what you had to like.
Is focused on this marvelous age in which we live. Men and women will know, and children will be taught, that we have a finer land, a better people, a more noble civilization, because these humble children of God were willing to suffer for righteousness' sake.
Did you hear the Shakespeare cadences there from the St. Crispin speech? And did you notice the incredible blending in the image of the Father God, the children of God, with the reference to the Sermon on the Mount from Jesus? Notice how we put those together? The third influence shaping King's conscience is Jesus himself. King saw himself, as he said the night I heard him, as a pastor. I have always been primarily, he said, a pastor. Fairly early, perhaps as early as 58, he was confiding to such friends as Ralph Abernathy that he felt his destiny was to be the voice of conscience for all America in his day, and that he experienced such a destiny as a crushing weight. He was very young. He had broken and wounded places in his life. A full and compassionate review of his life will find immense tragedy and significant sin in it. What enabled him to make such a heroic response to his calling, in spite of his brokenness, was, I believe, the mission he received from the teaching and person of Jesus. That mission of the kingdom of God, the destination of the whole work of his life, guided King and served as corrective to the various developments in those turbulent days. That message of the kingdom
revealed, and all flesh shall see it.
It is Jesus' vision of the kingdom of God that forms the context of all King's prophetic critique of his time. When he spoke against the war, he said,
"The path from Dexter Avenue Baptist Church, where I began my pastorate, leads clearly to this sanctuary tonight.
He made that path explicit moments later when he said,
I have to live with the meaning of my commitment to the ministry of Jesus Christ.
in King's view of Christ's ministry, as well as the rest of his own, the whole world was his parish. He says,
To me, the relationship of this ministry to the making of peace is so obvious that I sometimes marvel at those who ask me why I am speaking against the war. Could it be that they do not know that the good news was meant for all men, for communists and capitalists, for their children and for ours, for black and for white, for revolutionary and conservative? Have they forgotten that my ministry is in obedience to the one who loved his enemies so fully that he died for them? What can I say to the Viet Cong or to Castro or to Mao as a faithful minister of this one? Can I threaten them with death, or must I not share with them my life?
those were really decisions to say. His headlong and reckless commitment to Jesus just made us. Jesus' vision of the kingdom, especially as articulated in Matthew 25, which is the parable, you know, about the sheep taking of the which you did to the least of these, my brothers, you did it to me, and the Lucan parables of compassion. That vision crashes through religious boundaries in two social directions, downward and outward. God's favor in this vision rests on the poor, and it extends radically outward to the previously alien. The last shall be first, and the first shall be last, says the Lord. And many will come from east and west and will eat with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. Given King's commitment to this apocalyptic vision, there is a kind of eerie and compelling quality to the final paragraph that he left us. It was inevitable, I suppose, for the greatest of the African-American preachers to use as the vision of the kingdom of God the moment of the slaves poised near Israel, waiting to enter the promised land. It was just a staggering thing to me. But these are his last words, that he steps into Moses' place and gives out one last time the mission. Quoting from the 1950s one of his last section.
And then I got to Memphis, and some began to say the threats or talk about the threats that were out. What would happen to me from some of our sick white brothers? Well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead, but it doesn't matter with me now, because I have been to the mountaintop, and I don't mind. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place, but I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will, and He's allowed me to go up to the mountain, and I've looked over, and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. And I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
Thank you. Amen.